Hey Ed, welcome
Hello.
to the College Tribune's interview about your manifesto. Thanks for being here.
No
Very
problem.
glad to have you. So I suppose we'll start off with the very kind of basic question that everyone's probably dying to know. Why are you running to be the president of UCDSU? What drove you to consider even running for the role?
I am currently in my final year of law with politics, and I've always been involved with the SU. It was one of the first things I did. I was a class rep. I was the first ever law college officer elected in 2018. I've always had a passion for helping my classmates, helping my people in my course, and I feel I'm a good fit for president. I have leadership experience, I have team building experience, and I know how the SU works. But I've also seen UCD from outside the SU. I've seen how it affects students and also how students have complaints of the SU and issues and how they feel maybe underrepresented or that they feel the SU is lacking things. And I feel I can bring all that experience, ensure that the SU represents all students and that all students feel valued as members of UCD Students' Union.
Absolutely, yeah. But would it be fair to say, being a class rep, of course, and being the law college officer, you've had a lot of experience then with the SU. But what do you think distinguishes the roles that you've had to the role of the president of the SU, and what makes you qualified specifically for that role to lead the union, not to merely just be a part of it, but to lead it?
I have sat on various boards. I've seen how the SU works operates internally, but in terms of taking the leadership aspect, I always feel I have good people skills. I'm very approachable. I can come if someone has a problem, I can work with them in that way. I think the SU, the leadership is something that it needs someone who is dedicated and passionate, but also someone who has the drive to push the SU to bigger and better things. I can use the experience I've gained from being a class rep, being a college officer. I know how they feel. I know how they want to feel valued and ensure that they can shape the SU how they want it. But I can also use the experience I have from my experience past with the Law Society as an access leader to kind of marry those things together and ensure that I can know how to represent all students. And I've been around UCD for 4 years. I have a good idea how the university operates, and I feel I can, the experience I can add is something that my opponents can't.
Absolutely, cool. So yeah, going back to the experience that you've just mentioned there about, being so involved in the SU and in university life. But specifically about your experience with the union, I want to ask what you think the union's biggest failings have been in the last few years.
It is most certainly, without a doubt, engagement. When I was in first year, my first memory of the SU was Katie Asco. Katie Asco got, I think, 1,200 people vote for her for president. 6,600 people voted in the impeachment referendum. Approximately 1,000 people voted voted in the presidential election last year. That's a massive, massive drop. The people voting in the elections has consistently dropped. Engagement has fallen with the SU, and it needs to see why that is done. In my opinion, the SU has done great work campaigning, and that's fine. The SU has an engagement problem, which has gone far beyond campaigning and just saying, we're going to campaign for this, we're going to have town hall meetings. That's fine, but we need to bring people to the SU. So we need to have more events on campus when we can, more online events, and we need to show people why the SU actually is good and why it benefits them. When I was law college officer, I had coffee mornings in Sutherland building, and they were really successful, really popular because students got free tea, coffee, donuts, free food. They knew the SU was there for them. They could benefit straight away. It was quick, it was easy, it was cheap, and most importantly, it was beneficial and students enjoy it. The SU going big, going extravagant is not always the way. Sometimes it's good. When I was in first year, there was freshers ball, and freshers ball was massive, and it always is. But those are things that we need to show that SU we can go big, we can go tough, we can go big in campaigning, but also we'll do the small things, and that's the little things that will improve the lives of students. But in going back to what your main question was, it's engagement, it's mobilization of students, that students can first of all know they can benefit from the SU, and then lead that into campaigning, getting people involved in campaigns. A lot of the problem, in my opinion, that's been seen this year is they've been saying we need more campaigns. We need to have campaigns on this, but we can't do it unless students come to us. That's fine saying that once or twice, but it's been reiterated multiple times. That has become a problem that if that's being said consistently, there is an engagement problem that has to be addressed before you can just say we're going to have campaigns. You need students to know the value of getting involved in those campaigns.
Yeah, what you said there about engagement dropping, and something that you did was hold a lot of coffee mornings, and students benefited from that. But how do you think that relates to students benefiting in a more structural manner of UCD's failings as a university in terms of welfare and health services, and all of those things across campus? How do you think coffee mornings can help students when there's structural problems at play at the same time?
They're not going to help students in that space. That has to, looking at engagement, it has to be taken in a twofold way. We need to be campaigning. We need to be consistently, engaging with students and dealing with that aspect. But looking at, in my opinion, the engagement aspect is too far gone. We need to put into a footballing context. You can't score a goal from long distances. You can't, score extravagant points if you can't do the basics. You have to, in football context, you have to mind your house, look after them then. So if you have the coffee morning, students might know, okay, they can actually get involved, but you need students, if you have a campaign, to show the university that we are affected. We need large numbers, but we can't get large numbers if students are going to say, well, I can't be bothered because the SU don't do anything. That's the thing. And we can show we have hundreds of students here who are here at this, who have signed this petition, are at this protest. But we can't do that if students don't know anything about the SU and don't feel valued. And that's something we need to make students feel valued and represented by UCD Students' Union.
Absolutely. So in terms of COVID, and everything you said there about increasing engagement through coffee mornings and through events on campus, they're all quite physical elements of increasing engagement. How do you plan to do this within the pandemic restrictions, which may as well lead into the next academic year?
Yeah, I envisage it will. I imagine it will be COVID will be, unfortunately, we'll be learning online for probably a good part of next year. So that needs to be constant dialogue with students. We need to have more engagement online. So how do you do that? On my manifesto, I've said I'd establish a SU president social media account, like how to have in Trinity for their SU, so that students can touch base. They can know, okay, well, this is what the president is doing. Okay, that's good. If I want to get the president, I might want to send him an email. I might just pop a text. That might be more beneficial for that student. One thing to have more online events, quizzes. As class rep this year, I've organized quizzes for my class, and they've been really beneficial to classmates, especially for final years, because we're talking a lot about engagement of first years, and that's going to lead to second years because they're all in that same bracket. But final years are really affected by this because first years, second years don't know their classmates for a large part, but final years do. So that's where we really need to work, that they always feel valued, that they know as well, okay, well, the SU are doing this. We're having more kind of events. Oh, we're going to get guest speakers in. We're going to have maybe as well on my campaign, on my manifesto, there's how to be a UCD student. So it would be an in-person series, but if it needs to be a virtual series where you'd have maybe a sabbatical officer or the college officer talking about, how to survive online. So you could be working to get better online resources. And that's something that we really need to be pushing in the SU, more online resources. The whole idea of core textbooks, they cannot be available only in the library or to be purchased. They need to be available online. It's not acceptable that students are asked to pay €125 when they can't even access the library to get maybe the 1 or 2 free copies because they're in person. We need to be pushing for that, the better resources, but it's also that students feel that they can contact the SU no matter what. Online office hours need to be advertised for for a sabbatical officer. They are advertised currently online, but it's not really, it's advertised for the graduate officer fantastically well, but it's not advertised for every other position. That they can, pop a thing if it's a Zoom call, just log in a couple of minutes, and if a student has a large query, they can just say, oh, look, message me, or I'll send you a time, we'll have a chat and we'll go through whatever concern. But they know the SU is always there for them. It needs to be the continuation of welfare support. So the period products and various other sanitary products need to be sent out to students consistently by post. That's including COVID and post-COVID. That's a very good thing, and I hope it continues going forward. And it needs to be that students can know their SU will always be there for them, and they need to know what the SU is doing. So
yeah, I just want to touch base on something you said there about establishing an SU president social media account where students can contact you. So on your manifesto, it says that it's under the heading of transparency. Do you think the union has a transparency problem, that it's not transparent enough?
So currently there are minutes posted for meetings. There are council minutes and exec minutes. In recent years, there haven't been, like, I know it's one person doing it, so it is secretary is a really tough job, and it's a job I would never do myself personally but I'm terrible at taking minutes. But it's a job that needs it possibly needs that extra support, but it's just to get the minutes out as soon as possible so that the likes of the Observer, the Tribune can access them and report them back to students. Maybe it's a possible case that I know sabbatical officers do like a touch base each week, but if you had a dedicated social media account for each sabbatical officer, they could do each individually for each week, and it could just be a minute, be like, now sometimes it might be very short. It might be, I attended a load of meetings this week that are, there's a lot of fancy names for these committees, but, I've been doing work for this. But it's just so students know, okay, well, they're actually, I know what they're doing. I can say, well, what's the president doing today? Well, oh, he's doing this. He's at this meeting, he's at governing authority, he's at the university program board. So I know that what he's doing.
The UCDSU isn't enough. Why do you think there is a specific need for a president account when the UCDSU account seems to do that anyway?
It's about ensuring that students know what each individual sabbatical officer is doing, because it's ensuring that they feel a greater connection to the student union. It's very kind of maybe once or twice a trimester, students can be like, okay, well, is that all you've done in 6 months? You've kind of looked into organizing stuff. But if you have like weekly check-ins or bi-weekly check-ins, it's increasing that. But it's also that if you are the president and you're really passionate about, you want to make a statement about such thing, if every sabbatical officer is making statements on the SU social media, it would be on one account. It would be consistent. Like, it would just be clogging people's news feeds and people just wouldn't read them. But if you have someone who's like really interested in seeing what the president is doing, they can just click in, and if, say, the president wanted to make a statement on CETA, he could do that very easily, and he wouldn't have to clog. It wouldn't be taking up everyone's social media account, and a good focus. Or it could be something that, say, the education officer might want to post a lot more stuff related specifically to higher education, to Susie, etc. So they could tailor it to a specific role. I would say the Instagram has been probably one of the best things the SU has done. It's very simple, a fantastic idea, and everyone can know this is what the entertainment officer is doing. So it would be based around that.
Okay. Okay. So moving on to another part of your manifesto, where you stated that you want the SU to be more vocal on local and national issues. I want to ask why, and do you not think that the SU has been more vocal in the last couple of years on local and national issues?
I think it is. I think it needs, so I would say that would be more of a continuation of being consistently vocal, that yes, students know their student union is, it's not just focusing on UCD related issues, but also other aspects that are related to being a student in UCD. So environmental issues, homelessness, all effects that direct provision, matters that really do affect UCD students. It would, in terms of local issues, I would personally like to see UCDSU focus that we always remember we are a students' union, but we are predominantly a UCD students' union. So we need to be focusing specifically on showing that we are consistently representing UCD students' union. UCD students, a lot of the time, the campaign, the social media it's very much focused on a lot of stuff that aren't really related to being a UCD student. But that's where, if you had a dedicated social media account and the campaigns officer had a dedicated social media account, they could say, post stuff that are relevant to campaigns that are not necessarily related to being a UCD student. So that's where expanding that. And then you'd have the SU social media account, which would focus campaign, post stuff that are relevant, say library opening hours, more study spaces that are specifically related to being a UCD student. But it's just that people know the SU is always constantly representing their views, which is impossible to do because UCD is so wide, but it's the general body.
So it's a way to increase engagement with students again, to talk about issues that are relevant to them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's where council comes in. Council is very much this year has been probably the least debated council. It's really annoying that I think every motion has actually passed, and the majority of them haven't been really debated at all. And the majority of them as well that haven't been debated are ones that are related to national campaigns, which is like, and I don't think it's a case that students don't care or they're not interested. I think it's more that we need to be encouraging UCDSU vocal on UCD issues because they're the ones that actually get debated at council, because they're the ones that actually directly affect UCD students. So I brought a motion that mandates the UCDSU to ensure that the website has an accessibility tool function, which allows it to be seen in high contrast, in larger font, and I advocating for lobbying that IT services do it for all UCD. But what that actually had was a really good debate on the benefits of that, because that was going to benefit UCD students specifically. And that was a campaign that, if it was successful, would really benefit the lives of UCD students. So that's the campaigns that, in my opinion, we should be focusing primarily, and then expanding those into main national campaigns.
So basically, it's to increase engagement, and you're saying that UCDSU being more local, being vocal on local and national issues will increase student engagement, but we also need debate on.
We need debate.
How do you expect to increase debate or open up a platform for debate?
If you look at the current policy book, what you currently have is the majority of people that bring the policies to council are sitting sabbatical officers. And it's kind of, this year, in my opinion, they've been adopting the policy of, if you want to bring a motion to council, it doesn't have to go through a sabbatical officer, but they would highly recommend it does. That's fine. It's quite common for the majority of motions to be brought by sabbatical officers, but we need to encourage class reps bringing motions, because they're the ones who are on the ground, encouraging class reps to say to their classmates, if you want to have a discussion, you know, if you want something to be brought emotion, say, relating to science students, relating to whatever aspect there that's interesting them, you know, bring that and we'll bring that to council. But it's also encouraging in discussions inside their specific college. So that's having more town hall meetings, that if it's in relating to, say, law students and the price of the books, or students going on placement, if that's having more discussions for them that are localized internally within their own college. But it's getting students who are passionate about specific campaigns to come to them. It is a job that has to be done. It's very difficult online because students are a stake of looking into a screen consistently for college, and then looking into a screen then for their extracurricular activities, especially when you're in a bedroom like myself, where everything is in a bedroom. So that's the case. That is a more tricky thing. So we need to work very carefully to get so students are passionate. Meetings, they need to be short and snappy, because students don't want to spend hours looking into a camera and looking into a screen. But they need to be so that students know, well, this is actually really important and it's really beneficial that if I go and have my voice heard. And that's, we need the SU, it's the student's voice, and we need students to voice their concerns if they want to us, so we can voice them. And that would be my job as president, to voice the views of students. And that's if students come to us with a campaign, if someone says, Ed, I have this campaign for assisting social science students, I think it'd be really beneficial. Yeah, come to us, and then we'll sit down, we'll plan it out, and we'll work with whichever campaigns officer. If it's, say, in Smurfit with postgraduate students, we'll sit down with the business college officer, we'll sit down with the graduate officer, and we'll come together. And then, but always ensure that the student knows we're facilitating the campaign, we're helping you whatever way we can, but you're the one who has the final say. You're the one who has control. This is your students' union.
But to that, I would say that last year's election saw just a 4% turnout. So engagement has been dropping so much, and the last year has seen, from various different social media accounts, students losing complete faith in the SU. How do you expect to increase engagement and make students trust the union again?
What we need to do is show the value of being a student. It needs to show this is how students can benefit. Showing students can benefit from large campaigns is fantastic, and that needs to be done, but it's also the small things. So when I was in first year, the resit fees, they dropped, and that was specifically due, it was a small drop, it was very small, but it was the education officer at the time who really pushed for that. And that is something we can show. That wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the students' union. Bringing the introduction of hot drinks into the library, that was your students' union who were really pushing for that. And these are stuff the UCDSU who are working. It's the small gains to show, oh, you know how you can do that? That's because of the SU, or that was because a certain sabbatical officer has done that. But it needs to show students, you know, if you actually want to get people involved in the campaign, get people to run policies that you like, you know, well, geez, the easiest thing you can do is vote. You know, it only takes a minute. It takes longer to make a cup of tea than it takes to vote. So that's the way of getting students, you know, it's the little things. It takes it takes so quick to do it. And you can actually shape it in such a way, show what the SU has done in the past, and show the value of actually voting. It's the little things. Little things mean a lot. That's a quote of someone else. But yeah, it's to show that the SU is, it's the little thing. You know, if I remember one student saying to me, they would love if the SU provided period products, to which I said they do, and they just didn't know that. One student said to me,
a lot of people don't know anything about the period products being available.
That's exactly it. That's really annoying that students don't know you can actually get them if you ask your welfare officer. So the welfare officer needs to be pushing that. If the SU, the welfare officer does have a social media account, that it's just not really, it's dormant. So if they were there saying, if you need period products, you come to me, you pop me a message, you send me an email. I know it can be scary, or you mightn't, it can be whatever reason you mightn't like doing it, but you don't feel nervous, don't jump, pop me a message, and we need to show that we're welcoming.
Increase the access to the period products that students don't know about. Are you going to put in specific advertisements about them, notices about them? Is there?
Yeah, absolutely. It needs to be promotion on social media, that if you need them, you can contact the welfare officer, or if you can contact any relevant Spark officer. You might, so if say you're female and you don't want to contact the Spark officer because you're the welfare officer because you're male, contact another Spark officer who is female, or you feel more comfortable contacting. It's better promotion across campus. We need to get more signage. We need people to know the SU, what the SU does. And that's the main, it's about showing people the benefits of the SU and what the SU does. It will improve engagement. It's on social media. It's getting sponsored posts. I know this year candidates weren't allowed to sponsor posts, which I agree with, because it gives everyone a fair advantage, or it doesn't give anyone a disadvantage because they couldn't afford to do it. But if the main account was consistently doing sponsored posts of not campaigns they're running specifically, but period products are available. If you need exam supports, we're going to be there for you. We're always here for you. Instagram live things, more videos on Instagram. If you're sitting, I don't know, at home and you're drinking a cup of tea, you can just sit there. You don't even have to turn the sound up. You just have your captions on and you can just read them there. And it could be 30-second video, and it might say, here's your how to get period products, or here's what get whatever. And then the students know where they can do it. It has to be easily advertisable. It has to be advertised and students know exactly where to get them.
Yeah, so just like moving on to another part of your manifesto and something that has stood out, one distinguishing factor between your manifesto and SU presidential candidate Ruairí Power is that his manifesto is also available in Irish. Was it a tactical decision of yours to not have that manifesto in Irish?
No, my level of Irish wouldn't be good enough. Rory's fluent, and his campaign manager, to the best of my knowledge, is also fluent. I just don't. I wouldn't have the knowledge. I wouldn't have the Irish to translate it. It was an oversight.
Is Irish then something that you don't want to focus on as part of your presidency, increasing engagement with the language, or?
I do. I would. So I will be extended points on Irish, but it's in the Constitution as well that the president is one of the main core responsibilities for the SU to be promoting the Irish language. So it's a given. It wouldn't matter if I was anti-Irish. I would still have to promote it. It's in my job. That's we need to have better. It's working. Shocked in the Gaeilge. It needs to be, one of the headline focal points of the SU. It needs to be working that council. If everyone could have their cúpla focal as Gaeilge, each council. I know what used to happen was the chair used to always introduce it to the council in Irish. That'd be maybe a good thing to bring back. Signage, more signage in Irish. Unfortunately, my Irish just isn't good enough. I do apologize for
that. Moving on then to creating additional study spaces in UCD, another part of your manifesto. How do you plan on going about doing this, and where do you want these additional study spaces? And as well as this, putting it into context of obviously living in COVID times and there are less people on campus, how viable do you really think this part of your manifesto is?
So consistently students have, while there are a lot of students studying from home, there are also a lot of students who are studying, who have decided, I have all online classes, but I'm going to live in Dublin. I'm going to live there because it creates more of a college environment, which suits me. And I want to go into the library. And if I want to go into a library to get a book, I don't want to just have to travel 40 minutes to go get a book. And, I may as well study there and then drop the book back afterwards. So that needs to be study spaces. So the buildings, they need to be open, especially at weekends. I know Building 71 has recently been announced it's going to be open on Sundays, which is really good, but it needs to be more available places. Buildings need to be opened, classrooms, especially during exam times. Students want, they don't want to be studying on the corridors. A student contacted me saying that they had to study on the corridor because all the classrooms were locked in their building, which wasn't good enough because they especially weekends, exam times are stressful. So you need to be able to, sit down, find a place. If it's a room, you're by yourself. So that it needs to be pushed. That buildings need to be open the whole time. Well, not every building, but certain buildings, and that needs to go back to the SU. That we can advertise, oh, Quinn, this room is open at this time on a Sunday. It might only be for a few hours, and it needs to be specifically the library. Now I know the library has had a lot of, it has been difficulty in longer opening hours due to COVID, but that needs to be pushing that we need better supports. We need financial support pushed into the library that they can afford to get a required number of staff to open Monday to Friday and at the weekends, so the students can access the library, can get books, but also that they can have a quiet study space that they can study, and that's not an additional worry of their exams and their assignments, and also throw onto that, oh, you mightn't have anywhere to study.
And then I suppose going on again from the relevance of your manifesto during times of COVID when less and less people are on campus. Another part of your manifesto stated that you'd like to lobby for reduced rent prices. My question to you is, how do you plan on doing this? And again, lobbying support for it on a fairly empty campus and at a time when UCD residences probably have less people than have ever lived in them in the last couple of years, and particularly seeing as Joanna's campaign a year ago seemed to really go nowhere with reducing rent prices. How do you plan on doing this during your presidency, if it comes to it?
I would say, so we'll take the less people living on campus. If going to UCD, I'd say, well, there's less people going. People are going to say, I'll study at home. So if they see the price of renting in campus, they might say, well, I'm not going to afford to do that. But if you had reduced rent prices, they might say, I can actually, this makes more sense. I can live there. Or a student might say, well, I'm going to live in Dublin, but I'm going to live in Walkinstown. I'm going to live in Lucan, which is cheaper. But I'm going to, and I can do that. But if you had campus accommodation, reduced prices, they might say, well, I'm going to live on campus instead. And that would actually increase revenue overall for UCD. The more people there, it might be reduced rent, but it would be cheap, more revenue overall because you have more students living there and they'd be spending more in the SU shops and in various things in UC. But how can I do it? One thing I have over my opponents that neither, unfortunately, well, unfortunately for myself, I have always lived on campus. I've always required accessible accommodation. I can't live off campus. There is no accessible accommodation, wheelchair accommodation in UCD or outside UCD. If I wanted to live off campus, I would have to commute every day from Roscommon, which is not feasible. So what I can do is I can show that UCD, it is very much a must that people with disabilities can afford to live on campus, and that they have no choice. So what you're saying to a student who has a disability, who is a wheelchair or is visually impaired, you have no choice but to pay these extraordinarily large fees or commute, which will probably make going to UCD not a viable option. But as well, and that also extends to students who need a personal assistant at night. They have to pay twice the amount because they have to pay for their accommodation and the personal assistance, and they get no financial support for that. That's not good enough. They need to be ensured that they can get their personal assistant for free, and that that's not a barrier for them. So I can add that. I can push that that is something that my opponents, while they can push, they can use that example. I actually have first-hand experience of that, and that is an approach that we can take. I would say with Joanna's, COVID kind of did put a clamp on that but you know, if at first you don't succeed, try again. I don't believe in the approach of, you know, not stopping after one go. You know, it needs to be consistent. That we can't show the UCD thing just because, you know, well, we asked once, so we're not going to ask again. You know, you have to keep pushing that the UCD know this is a consistent problem, and that UCDSU won't be silent just because of COVID or because UCD says no.
But do you think that this will be a viable campaign? And do you think it's something the union should spend a lot of its time doing, or a lot of its resources in campaigning for, especially when you can't do the same things that the first campaign had, as in protests on campus, walk-ins? So how will you really gather momentum?
Campaigning, the days of protesting like that, unfortunately, walk-ins it's not going to happen with COVID, but it is a viable option. It is most certainly worth continuing. In terms of, should the SU be putting a lot of its effort into this campaign? Yes, it should, because while other campaigns will benefit UCD students, this is actually something that will distinctively benefit them. We are a students' union who represents the rights of UCD students. This is distinctively related to UCD. On-campus accommodation does not relate to anyone else, bar UCD students and maybe a few extra people who live on campus. So this is why it actually makes sense for SU to be focusing a large part of its effort. Now, there is a student residences coordinator. Unfortunately, the accommodation officer this year in the SU, due to COVID and various cuts, had to be couldn't be continued. That needs to be brought back, so the SU can focus, that other officers can focus specifically on ensuring that the rights of that campaign can be increased further. The accommodation officer needs to be brought back, and if not, it needs to be seen how that role can be distinctively given to one sabbatical officer. But unfortunately, like, I know the current president of the welfare officer has been kind of juggling that role, but it's not a viable option going forward. So it would need to be brought back in, the accommodation officer, if the SU could afford to do it.
So another question I have regarding, I suppose, affordability, that it's been brought up now, and what the union can afford and not afford. Something in your manifesto that sticks out about this is that you want to establish a bursary for students who are struggling to pay their rent. Now, there are funds available already in UCD called the Student Support Fund, which is means tested, and one that's called the Student Welfare Fund, and that's not means tested. So what would your bursary entail? How is it different to the funds that are available already?
This will come specifically from your student union. So it would be a student union fund. So I don't think it was this year, but the Erasmus fund coming from your student union. It was it wasn't, I think it was €900 fund scholarships for your Erasmus. But this will be targeted specifically. It would have to be means tested to a degree, so that students will be able to show, well, think of this like a student going on placement who requires accommodation for 4 weeks in Dundalk, that a student might say, well, I can't afford, I'm struggling to pay my rent for that. Okay, well, we'll help you. We'll give you whatever €100 you need a week, or it might give you a partial part of that, but we can support in some way. It would have to be means tested to a degree, but it would be a case that it would. Sorry?
How do you expect to raise funds for it?
It would have to come out of the specific SU. It would come out of our corporate sponsorship, general membership. SU shops need to be, hopefully when the SU shops are back up and running in full way, we can use the revenue, but it will be coming from the general, the way the SU would normally take in membership, corporate funding from EY is our main sponsor.
How many students do you expect to help with this bursary?
It wouldn't be that, look, it would be, if we could help 20, 30, and I think, I can't remember off the top of my head, the postgraduate and the PhD conference fund is, I think it might be 30. I could be, I don't know the number off the top of my head. So, but if you could help that amount of students, you are improving the lives of those students. You're not helping a lot, but if you helped 20, 30, even if you help 10, what you're doing is you are really benefiting the lives of those students. We it's if there's no point in saying we are not going to help students because we're only going to benefit 30 people. You have to help. It's only a small number that we know that no matter who you are, big groups, small groups, you are represented.
Yeah. Why do you think the union hasn't established such a bursary before, or support fund? Is it because of financial difficulties, because of a lack of budgeting?
Yeah, I think it's something that I don't know if it has been discussed before. I would imagine it's something that maybe all of the above, kind of just lack of funds, and then maybe they just said, okay, well, we'll focus elsewhere. But I think this is where the president can work to show that if they're passionate about something to be brought in. This is where you have your elections that you say, well, you're going to elect a candidate who's going to do X, Y, Z, and this is why I want
funding already. How much can you really even guarantee the bursary to be set up during your potential?
It would be wrong for me to say how much, because we don't know the state of the SU is going to be in a year. It would depend on how much the shops can open. So it would. We don't know what the financial state of the SU is going to be. We do know we are lucky that we'll always gain money from membership because of coming from student membership, but it's ensuring that we can get support, and if needs be, going to corporate sponsors and saying we want sponsorship for this project. But it would be wrong for me to put a number to it because we just don't know. From speaking to student unions, my response I got from running campaigns and such was, there is money there if you want to run something. That's the general response. So don't think you can't run a campaign if you think there's going to be no money. There is money there, but don't go. There won't be big balls or such. Freshers ball it wouldn't be feasible just with COVID, but there is money there. It's not, the SU isn't in a terrible financial state.
Moving on then to the advocacy section of your manifesto, you specifically outlined the environment and UCD achieving the green flag to be something that you want to advocate for as president of the SU. So environmental climate activism is something that the union has worked hard on during 2019 and 2020, the academic year, where a lot of strikes were campaigned for Fridays for Future. What do you think, coming on from that activism to the present situation in UCD, what do you think the key issue is that's stopping UCD from achieving its green flag?
It's making the campus more cleaner. It's ensuring that students, it's increased the number of bins on campus. It's recycling bins, compost bins around campus. I know this has been something that's been worked upon, and I know there is work. In order to get a green flag, there has to be a committee established. To the best of my knowledge, there is a committee in place, but it's ensured that the UCDSU is constantly supporting wider environmental campaigns, but also distinctively in UCD, and Eco UCD and the environmental campaign coordinator this year have done fantastic work with that. So it's expanding on that, ensuring that students know, well, if I'm that little bit more environmentally cautious in UCD, we can get the green flag, like in schools when we were all in school and we had the green flag and we had this big holiday over it. And it was great, it was great. And it gave a great sense to the UCD community that, oh, well, I threw that in the recycling bin there, and this actually contributed, and there, that flag, I contributed to that flag. So,
but then how do you think e-scooters and lobbying for them are going to help UCD achieve its environmental aims?
Yeah, so it's going to reduce taking e-scooters. The aim of that would be, so I've spoke to Zip Mobility. They're a company who's done a UCD startup who's done a lot of work in getting e-scooters brought into into use in Dublin, and what their aim is that it will reduce the amount of cars, the amount of traffic being brought onto campus, which first of all would increase the amount of car spots for people who actually want to use them. That students who travel short distances could just use their e-scooter, but it's also ensuring that, you know, that would reduce the amount of emissions coming into UCD. But in terms of e-scooters as well, UCD is such a long campus. It's such a long campus, but it's also such a hilly campus as well. So e-scooters would have the benefit that students could, who maybe struggle to walk up long distances or hills, would have that flexibility that they could just shoot up. I know myself from being in a wheelchair, it's going, especially when it's raining, going up a hill, up cross concourse is not enjoyable, but it's environmental. It would reduce the amount of carbon emissions coming from cars, and it would ensure that it would be more environmentally friendly and more cost effective for students.
Okay. So kind of just wrapping up now for the final three sort of questions. I suppose, like, after all the questions and things that we've discussed after from your manifesto, a lot of the things that you're promising require physical presence on campus and are issues that pertain to students who are on campus. But I want to know the three most important things from your manifesto that you will do, whether it's COVID or no COVID. So three things that are relevant during times of no COVID and times of COVID that you promise to deliver on.
Separately, three, COVID and
separately, so not separately, sorry. Three things that are relevant to both COVID and no COVID.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, one thing is the library. So we all know the library resources in person, lobbying for more books, increased amount of books, especially books that are really expensive that students can't afford. But it's also ensuring more online resources, more better access to like libraries, online stuff. So it's ensuring like that, and it's ensuring that more spaces are available in library and more study spaces. Looking at its supports, it's ensuring that UCDSU is always advocating for better access to the counselling service, be that online or in person, that better access to health products, sanitary products, better access to disability supports. Students, regardless if you are studying on campus or at home, you always will, a lot of students will need disability supports, be that having a reader or whatever, needing a note taker. They need, and we need to ensuring that they have those access to supports. And it's ensuring that SU is there for students, that it's campaigning on issues that are relevant to students, whether they're at home or they're in person, and that they're having, you know, stuff that can benefit students. So it's having more events, be those online, that they can feel connected to the SU and ensuring that they know what the SU is doing, that what, you know, the SU is there and that they feel represented, valued, and that feel they can benefit from being a member of the SU.
So library, student supports, and benefit from the SU. Those are the three things that you want to promise to deliver on.
Yeah.
Going on to the second last question. What is it about your manifesto that's different to the other presidential candidates? A specific thing that is different that distinguishes your manifesto to others, and why people should vote for you on account of that?
My manifesto revolves around it's accessibility, ensuring that stuff is always accessible to students. It's ensuring that students know they can access supports, which now other candidates have obviously said, but it's also ensuring that the UCDSU is supporting students with COVID and outside COVID. One thing which one of my opponents can't do is say what it's distinctively like as a student this year with COVID, because he wasn't a student, which it's something I can do. I know what it's like to be a student. I know what it's like to be a student going on Erasmus. I know what it's like to be a student in final year. I know what it's like to be a student who's gone from being a SU hack to not being an SU hack. That's why I can bring all the experience and show this is how my manifesto represents the views of all students. It's ensuring that, you know, the SU is campaigning for stuff that's not just going to appease SU people, but it's also going to appease the wider student body. So it's to benefit, my manifesto is designed to benefit the wider student body and that all students can benefit from it.
So would it be fair to say that your manifesto focuses on the little things about providing supports, accessibility? But what about the structural issues within UCD, such as a lack of funding for counselling, which is something that you want students to have access to? How do you plan on increasing funds for that?
As president, as the SU, I can't increase funds. It would be impossible for me to increase funds. That is our job to lobby the counselling service, to lobby UCD to increase funds for counselling service and increase access to it. It's to increase the easy methods for students to avail of it, and that students don't feel rushed or feel pressurized into saying, well, you have 5 counselling, here's 5 counselling appointments, you have 5, you don't have any more. Or if you want 5 afterwards, you know, we'll see how then. That students know you have access to this consistently, and that UCD know that that students need this, and it's our job to show, you know, this is how it will actually benefit students. That if you increase funding, what you're going to do is if you increase funding, you're going to improve the lives of students, and students are going to be then getting better grades, which is going to look better for the university, and the university is going to get more money. But you can't do that unless you increase the supports. You need to increase the mental health supports. You need to increase the disability supports, the library supports, because you're going to get better results from students. So if you increase funding there, it's actually going to work better for you. So, you know, you have to spend money to make money. So if you spend money to better supports, you're actually going to make more money, because the university is going to look better, because students are going to be performing better, because they're going to be happier in your UC, and they're going to enjoy their degree and their college experience more.
Final question. What will you do differently to the current president of the SU?
I will be focused specifically on ensuring that Connor has done fantastic work ensuring that SU is campaigning on stuff that is issues that students are affected by, the nursing and midwifery students, ensuring that they are paid for placement. He's been campaigning for that, which is really good. I will ensuring that UCDSU that the president is on the ground where possible, but also where students know I'm approachable. You can pop me a text at any time. I would always be someone who, I don't care, pop me a message on Facebook. If you had dedicated social media, you wouldn't need to be friends with me on Facebook. You could just send me a text. I'm approachable. I am someone who is going to be, I'm not afraid to voice opinions. And I like using committees. I think committees are really important, that you have student representation on those committees, that you are utilizing them. It's easy to shout outside the committee, but it's much easier to shout in the committee where you are being heard. So I will ensure that student voice is always being heard and represented, and that students know if you have a concern or an idea or initiative, you can come to me, and I'll always be there and help you ensure that UCDSU will, if you have an idea and you want to run something, you come to your UCDSU because it's your students' union.
Is there anything else that you'd like to
add? Vote for me. No, that's
perfect.
Yeah. So I hope people see that I'm experienced. I know how the SU works. But I also have been outside the SU. I can bring experience and a fresh perspective to the role, and I hope that people can see that I'm a different type of candidate. I'd like to think I'm in between the two candidates. I have experience. I have leadership experience. I have team building experience. I know what the problems are in the SU, and I know the benefits of being a member of the SU. And I want all students to benefit and feel valued and represented.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Ed.
Thank you.
Thank you.